All right, this video is going to be about floodplains. Floodplains are low-lying areas near the stream, so they're in the valley, that are periodically inundated with floodwaters. And so we're going to talk about some of the features that you might see on a floodplain. So here is the river, here is its valley, and this area is the floodplain. So because it is created by this floodwater, the flood carries with it sediment. That sediment, remember, is called alluvium. So a floodplain is a depositional landform built up by alluvium. So if we look here, first of all, do you think floodplains occur where the gradient is steep or gentle? Hopefully you said gentle. And you can see it's gentle here because of this meandering stream. And a meandering stream really goes to laterally erode its valley, creating the floodplain. What kind of land use do you think is going on in this picture adjacent to the river, in the floodplain, if you will? It's agriculture. Why do you think people might farm in a floodplain? Yeah, the alluvium, nutrient rich. You have flat land for farming and access to water. What might be problematic about living in a floodplain? Absolutely, the flooding. So how do floodplains develop? You imagine that initially this stream is coming down the slope, right? And as it comes down, it starts to level out its valley. And it starts to sway back and forth, changing course a lot. And as it's swaying back and forth, it is laterally eroding the area. Well, if there's a periodic flood, the water will overflow its banks, carrying the alluvium that is being transported in the water. So these are some of the features that you're going to see on a floodplain. This area here where it goes from being flat to a steep slope, this is called a bluff. And here we have it. I'm in the floodplain. You see the meandering river. That changes from very gentle slope to a steep slope. That's a bluff. Now in some cases, like the Mississippi River, the bluffs can be miles apart. In this case, in the picture in front of you, the bluff was like right behind me. Now when I was in New Orleans, I went again to the Mississippi River. This is another feature you might find. This is a levee. Now a levee is naturally occurring, and if I draw a little side view of it, so here is our river, right? This is our floodplain. When it periodically floods, it's going to overflow its banks carrying that sediment. Let me get a different color. It's going to deposit sediment right here. Well, then the waters recede. So let's get rid of the water here. Then we have another flood and more sediment is deposited. Eventually it builds up so that each subsequent flood has to be greater in volume than the other one to get over the levee. So this is a levee. Now you can see that this levee by the Mississippi River has been modified, right? What was interesting to me is when I was there, I was visiting some of the plantations, and I always thought that the plantation would be like sitting here where, like on the front porch, I don't know what I was thinking, you could see the river. No, the plantations are like down here on the other side of the levee. So here's a picture of one of the plantations, and you can't really see it from here. Well, maybe over here. This entire thing is up on these stilts. I could walk under here. So could my husband, who's like 6 feet. Why do you think this entire plantation is up on stilts? Yeah, because the river periodically floods and goes over the levee. Now, this is a slave quarter shack, for lack of a better word, farther away from the levee. It's up on stilts too, but you can see that it's much lower. That's because it's farther away from the river, so the waters, in theory, won't be as high as you get over here. Now, sometimes levees are breached. So here is talking about the Great Flood that happened in 1993 on the Missouri River. And What happens is here's the levee and the water breaches it. Now, many of you might remember when Katrina hit New Orleans and the levees broke. I always thought it was this kind of a levee, but it wasn't until I went to New Orleans that I discovered otherwise. So here's a picture of New Orleans. Here's the Mississippi River. So those levees are like right here on each side, let's say. But we also have some man-made levees over here. When the storm hit, what happened was not the flooding so much of the Mississippi River, but it was the flooding of this lake that sent this storm surge through these canals, and that's where the levees were breached. And all this area in blue was flooded. Now, the French Quarter is close to the river. It's actually slightly higher than other parts of the city because it's closer to the river. It's been built up over time, so it did not flood. Another feature you find on a floodplain is the back swamp. And so here's a picture. I was in the bayou when I was there. So here's the channel. You can see the levee is higher. The back slope, like this would be where the French Quarter was built. And then as you get farther and farther, it gets lower and lower and it gets less well drained. And that's where you find the back swamp. Another feature you'll find is the Yazoo Stream. So a Yazoo Stream is a tributary that runs parallel to a main river but can't join it because of these levees. It gets its name after the actual Yazoo Stream, which is in red here, which is a tributary of the Mississippi River. Now, engineers have made it so the Yazoo Stream didn't connect to the Mississippi River, so that's not so natural, but originally it was a natural occurrence because of the natural levees that are built up as rivers periodically flood. One of the coolest things I think you can see on a floodplain are the oxbow lakes. And I'll show you right here. See how this is in blue? You may not be able to see that blue color. Let's try yellow. Here's another oxbow lake and another one. Over here you see these are green. Those are not oxbow lakes. They have filled up with silt, no longer have water. These are what are called meander scars over here. So how does it work? If you imagine that you have a meandering river, I don't know if this will work. Oh, well, that is quite the river. Remember that the velocity does not flow equally, so it's greater wherever this blue line goes. So it's greater on the outside of the meanders than it is on the inside, right? That's why we have the cut banks. Well, eventually what will happen, and I can do this with the eraser, I think, is it'll cut through. Well, that didn't quite work, but it cuts through here, and the whole river starts to go this way, cutting off this meander. And what you have left is the Oxbow Lake. So this river used to come all the way over here, but eventually it cut off the meander. Here's a picture of a Oxbow Lake. So to recap, here are some landforms. This is a diagram from your textbook. If you identify these and send me a picture telling me what these are, and you can look on your study guide to find the terms that you're supposed to use, I'll give you a geo point. All right? Take care.